Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question which I will flip in here. And he wants to know, is there a perfect or an ideal or a best training protocol, particularly in the weight room, for actual fat loss? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, this is a good question, and here's the thing. Honestly, there are a couple of different schools of thought as far as this goes. Now, to answer the question, no, there is no perfect or ideal. There are two very, very good schools of thought. Both are proven, both are effective, but they contradict each other in a lot of ways. And you know what? They come down to personal preferences and needs of the individual. Now, a lot of people say things like, yeah, everyone's different, so you got to find what works for you. No, in this case, it's not that you're different. It's that people have different lifestyles. People have different preferences. This isn't because there's some physical difference between people that some weight training protocol is going to be better for one person than another for fat loss because they're different as far as their bodies go. It has to do with just personal preferences as far as things like fatigue management, time management, stuff like that. Now, it's generally accepted that weight training should at the very least preserve your muscle tissue while you're trying to lose fat. I mean, again, that's the idea. When you're losing fat, unless you're a noob making noob gains, you're not going to gain a bunch of muscle. Let's just be honest here. Anyone who thinks that they're going to gain a bunch of muscle while losing fat, if they're not a noob or didn't just go on their first big blast of trenbolone or something, that's just not the real world. That's not how it works. Your goal is generally going to be, during fat loss, to preserve your muscle tissue the best that you can. So the idea here is that the weight training should at the very least accomplish that, to stimulate at least enough muscle growth and stimulation to at least tell your body, hey, I need to hold on to the muscle I have. So by trying to stimulate growth, you're telling the body, hey, I need this muscle mass. But the idea can also become, is it even necessary to stimulate growth, or to just stimulate sustaining what you have? Meaning you don't necessarily need to increase. And then obviously you need activity to help burn calories, because truth be told, most of us like to eat, particularly people who've gained muscle and gained weight from bulking. That's the people who are then cutting oftentimes for fat loss. We usually like to eat. We've gotten used to eating more food. So you're going to need to find a way to increase your calories potentially the best that you can, so that you burn more calories and you don't just have to dramatically lower your intake. So the diet in, though, is its own topic. That's a totally separate topic, discussing fat loss diets. Now, as far as weight training goes, the two schools of thought, the prevailing schools of thought, are that you come in and you train just enough to hold on to the muscle you have. It might only be 1 or 2 sets per exercise. You might only be lifting 3 days a week. You're not trying to use the weight training to burn fat. You're not trying to use the weight training to fatigue yourself or to expend calories. You're just trying to hold on to the muscle, and then you go use cardio and more efficient methods of fat loss to get extra activity in. All right, that's one school of thought, very minimalist weight training approach, very proven effective method. The other effective school of thought is that you come in and you weight train to help lose weight. You come in and you try to boost your metabolism. You try to stimulate muscle growth. You try to burn calories in the weight room, because the idea there is that, again, body composition is your goal. Weight training is your #1 activity to do it. If anything, if you were to push enough volume and you were to peak everything perfectly, in some cases, you might not only preserve muscle mass, you might slightly recomposition. Now, this method is only going to work for people on very small calorie deficits or people on drugs, and that's what you need to keep in mind. The secondary approach is not going to be best for quick fat loss. So there's a big caveat there also. Now, when we look at these two, the pros and cons of them, the first one, fatigue management. Fatigue management, because weight training itself fatigues your body so much, then it's very easy to overreach and potentially overtrain when you're in a calorie deficit trying to lose weight. It is much easier. You're not giving yourself enough nutrients. You're going to tend to be stressed easier when you're eating less and you're dieting. You're going to have fatigue management problems. By doing the minimalist approach to training, you're going to get less tired. You're going to get less fatigued, which also means that you're going to feel better and be more active the rest of the day. When you're not in the weight room, you're more likely to be up and moving and doing different activities, because you're not sore, you're not tired, you're not going to get the soreness that will sometimes come with training hard when you're dieting, because you're not training that hard. You're coming in stimulating just enough to hold on to the muscle you have. You're not trying to increase. You might even slightly reduce what you're doing. You know, if you're deadlifting 450 pounds for 5-6 reps. Normally you might even drop that to 420, 430, because that'll be enough to hold on to your gains. You know, you're not going to come in and do a lot of volume or a lot of sets. You're there just to hold on to the muscle you have. Again, ideal for fatigue management. Ideal for people with busy lifestyles oftentimes, or active lifestyles, who can't really afford to get sore and tired and is irritable from potentially overreaching in the gym. Also, good idea for people who are trying to lose weight fairly quickly, because again, the faster you're trying to lose weight, the easier it is to get over-fatigued, over-stressed, over-taxed. And by doing it this way, you can minimize the chance of doing that. And then it leaves you to do lower intensity activities. All right, this is the best method for fatigue management, to keep yourself from getting irritable and tired. And of course, that will allow slightly faster weight loss because you're not at as much risk of overreaching. This is not going to be a good method for recomposition at all, though. Again, because at the best case, you're simply going to hold on to the muscle you have. But again, you can lose weight faster this way with less fatigue, if that's what your goal happens to be. The other approach, you're in the gym to come in and train. You're trying to, if possible, stimulate new growth. You're trying to come in and burn calories in the weight room, and you're burning calories through an activity that stimulates muscle growth. This means you come in and you're going to do a lot of high rep work. You're going to do a lot of sets. If you're training this way, and a lot of bodybuilders choose to train this way, some do, some don't, you're probably doing upwards of 15 sets per body part every week. You're probably doing a lot of higher rep work, stuff that's in the 10 to even 20 rep range. Why? Burns more calories, creates more metabolic fatigue, and that's the idea. You're in there to create metabolic fatigue in the muscle tissue to try to force new muscle growth in spite of not having a calorie surplus. And if you time everything correctly, you might be able to recomposition, potentially using a method like this. It might work if you dial everything in perfectly. Now, guys on drugs do recomposition oftentimes this way. This is very effective for bodybuilders on drugs who want to grow into a show a little bit, because they're stimulating a lot of growth and their body's allowing them to recover from it due to the drugs, even though they may not be eating enough calories to do so. They end up creating a larger calorie deficit into their fat tissue, and they get better nutrient partitioning, so it works. But again, if you're doing this method, you've got to limit the amount of cardio and stuff you can do. The downside to this method, fatigue is going to be much, much higher. This is not good for fatigue management. You're going to have to pay very close attention to fatigue management. You're going to have to pay very close attention to signs of overreaching, particularly signs of overtraining, because when you are not consuming enough calories and you're doing very high volumes of training, you are simply at a much higher risk of chronically overreaching. You're at a much higher risk of injury, even regressing, pushing yourself so hard that your body doesn't recover. It is harder to recover when you're losing fat, when you're in a calorie deficit. It simply is. So this latter method, you have to pay more attention to things like that. But it is the method that's going to allow you the best potential retention of muscle mass, if not the possibility of recomposition. And for a lot of people, that is their perfect goal. They don't mind dealing with the extra irritability, fatigue. If there's any chance that they might gain a single ounce of muscle while cutting body fat, a lot of people are willing to take that risk. But again, fatigue management becomes very, very, very important when you're doing that. And you really have to watch for those things, and you have to accept that when you're cutting and losing body fat, if you're in here training with high volume, high workload training and using the actual weight training to help you burn body fat in the hopes of stimulating more muscle growth on top of it, or at the very least keeping all of your muscle, you have to accept the fact that you're going to be more fatigued, you're going to be more tired, you're going to be potentially more irritable, and you're not going to want to be as active when you're outside of the gym. You're simply not going to have as much energy for it, just because, again, you're using up all your maximum recoverable fatigue is being utilized inside the weight room. You don't really have much left after that. So if you do any type of physically demanding job, or even some really stressful jobs, this might become a problem for you. This approach may not be ideal. And again, it's definitely not ideal for people who want to lose weight fairly quickly, because again, high volumes of weight training in the weight room and rapid weight loss are not a good combination, because you will very easily overreach. You will very easily push yourself when you're losing weight quickly due to the large calorie deficit. it's very easy to push yourself beyond the point where you can no longer recover. So that is the big downside to this method. So when someone asks, well, which one is the best one? How long is a piece of string? I mean, these are the two, I think, most popular, most proven methods by different people, different experts out there. They both work, but like any other tool in a toolbox, you have to use the right tool for your specific goals, for your specific needs right now. Someone might say, well, I prefer this method or that method. Well, that's fine until your lifestyle changes or your goals change. Well, what happens when those change? Your preferred method might change. Again, it's all going to be based on lifestyle, what you are trying to achieve, what you're willing to live with. Because again, both work, but both have their pros and both have their cons. And that's the thing. They're just tools in a toolbox. And that's the thing. People in this industry and in this community get married to certain concepts. And they can't accept the fact that sometime maybe the whole thing that they like to do or they base all their training on or an idea is just simply one tool in a toolbox. Such as guys who are like, I do high volume training. Really? Why? That's just one tool in a toolbox. High volume training is not the be all end all of anything. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's just a tool. Hit cardio can be terrible for some goals, great for others. You know what? It's just a tool in the toolbox. Don't get married to a concept and say, this is what I prefer and this is what I'm always going to prefer. Because these things don't work that way. They're just individual tools. When a hammer is appropriate, you use a hammer. When a screwdriver is the best tool, you use a screwdriver. If you have a favorite between a hammer and a screwdriver, well, you're going to be very, very limited in what you can build and accomplish with that. Think about it that way. And you need to think of all these training approaches and tools in exactly that same manner. They're just tools in a toolbox. Figure out what is appropriate for what you're trying to do right now and use the best tool. Don't use a hammer to drive in, to hammer in a screw, and don't try to use a screwdriver to screw in a nail. It's just not going to be as effective. You might get it done. It's not going to be the most effective for what you're trying to do. Think of it that way. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.